vice versa, that's something we can work on, as well as going in and rebounding.
I think our post passing was pretty good today. I think we found T, I think found me on some mismatch.
The Indiana Fever just suffered a tough, momentum-crushing loss to the Valkyries, and no matter how you dissect the game, statistically, energetically, or emotionally, the simple truth is that the Valkyries wanted it more. From the opening whistle to the final buzzer, there was a clear disparity in effort, urgency, and mental toughness. The Fever, by contrast, often looked disengaged and unsure, particularly during the critical third and fourth quarters when everything began to unravel. The Valkyries, despite facing a double-digit deficit at multiple points, trailing by 13 or more, never lost composure, never lost hunger. They kept clawing back, possession by possession, fueled by their relentless pace, their evolving defensive schemes, and the sheer electricity of the crowd at the chasing center, which transformed into a roaring sixth player. The Fever, on the other hand, moved lethargically, walking the ball up court, squandering possessions, and failing to contest defensively. They looked more like a team trying to survive than one trying to win, and their lack of fire ultimately betrayed them. The shooting woes didn't help either. Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell, the offensive lifelines of this team, had absolutely miserable nights. The two of them combined for a jarring 1-4-12 from the three-point line, a mark that underscored the larger problem. Indiana simply couldn't adapt when their initial game plan stopped working. Caitlin Clark shot just 3 for 14 overall and looked visibly frustrated and disconnected, committing too many turnovers, failing to generate any rhythm, and making questionable decisions in key moments. Kelsey Mitchell was equally off balance, and without even one of them stepping up, the Fever's offensive system imploded. Early in the game, it looked like Aaliyah Boston might cruise the Fever to a win, especially with Natasha Howard helping establish dominance in the paint. Indiana had total control of the interior in the first half. They sliced through the Valkyries' porous paint defense with ease, piling up high-percentage layups and dominating the glass. But championship-level teams make halftime adjustments, and that's exactly what the Valkyries did. When they came out for the second half, it was like watching an entirely different defensive unit. Suddenly, the paint was sealed off. Those wide-open driving lanes vanished. Post entries became crowded battlegrounds. When Natasha Howard or Boston tried to set up inside, the Valkyries swarmed with precision, doubling hard, rotating fast, and closing every window. Even basic pick-and-roll actions started falling apart. The Fever couldn't generate clean looks from the short roll anymore because the Valkyries' help defenders were sitting in the passing lanes, poking at the ball, turning simple sets into chaotic turnovers. The Fever were exposed. Not only could they no longer score in the paint, but they also couldn't kick out to reliable three-point shooters because their spacing collapsed and their confidence with it. Meanwhile, the Valkyries began exploiting Indiana's glaring season-long weakness, their interior defense. We've seen it all year. The Fever struggled to stop aggressive drives and disciplined bigs in the low post. The Valkyries attacked that weakness relentlessly in the second half, blowing by defenders like Natasha Howard at the top of the key, forcing the Fever to foul, and putting points on the board through sheer will. It wasn't just tactical, it was emotional. The Valkyries had the belief. They trusted each other, and as soon as they got into a rhythm, the crowd amplified their intensity tenfold. The turning point came midway through the second half, off a routine pick and roll. Caitlin Clark found Natasha Howard cutting to the basket, a pass that would have been a layup earlier in the game, but the Valkyries closed the gap and swarmed her immediately. What used to be an easy 2 points turned into a clogged lane, a strip, and a fast break going the other way. Moments later, Clark made a critical decision that summarized the whole game. She had Howard sealed inside but chose to pass to the corner instead, likely reading the incoming help. The Valkyries read it too, jumped the passing lane, stole the ball, and on the other end, Kate Martin nailed a deep three that detonated the building. That single play flipped the emotional axis of the game. From that moment forward, the Valkyries controlled everything. The clock, the tempo, the tone, and the belief. The Fever weren't just playing a better team. They were playing a team that now had momentum and purpose. A few plays later, Kate Martin added insult to injury by sinking a cold-blooded mid-range fadeaway over Clark, her confidence surging, the crowd unglued. That wasn't just a bucket, it was a message. The Fever had lost the psychological war. The Valkyries didn't just adjust their game plan, they imposed it. While Indiana remained stubborn and static, the Valkyries evolved. They closed off the paint, dared the Fever to beat them from distance, and the Fever simply couldn't. Turnovers piled up, fouls mounted, defensive lapses widened, and most importantly, leadership disappeared. There was no one on the Fever stepping up to calm things down, to bring order to chaos, to regroup the squad. They unraveled, slowly at first, then suddenly. What should have been a hard-fought one turned into a disappointing loss, not because of a single mistake or a fluke run, but because one team was growing while the other was shrinking. The Valkyries came into the second half with energy, intelligence, and a refusal to back down. The Fever came in flat, unready for a fight. In sports, willpower matters as much as skill. In this game, the Valkyries proved they had both, and the Fever, well, they're left with film to review and hard questions to answer.
For real, like you just gotta turn around and I mean, we have to learn from this one, but you gotta learn quick, and we haven't played New York yet, and we're one of the top teams, so we really just have to turn around and knock it.
The Indiana Fever's latest performance was deeply frustrating, not just because they lost a game they had a strong chance to win, but because of how the loss unfolded. This is not a team without talent, far from it. With elite-level players like Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell, the Fever have all the raw materials to be a top-tier WNBA team. Yet time and again, they fail to execute basic adjustments, make defensive stops, and play with the urgency and cohesion expected at this level. The Valkyries, now 6-6, are not scrubs. They're a serious team with strong fundamentals, solid depth, and a home crowd that energizes them every single game. Playing in front of 17,000 people at the Chase Center without Caitlin Clark even in attendance proves just how serious their fan base is. Once you let a team like that gain momentum, especially with a crowd fueling their confidence, it becomes incredibly difficult to shut them down. One of the most glaring issues in this game was the defensive intensity, or the complete lack thereof, shown by Indiana in the second half. The Fever started strong, building a solid lead with efficient play, especially in the paint. Aaliyah Boston was dominating early with clean finishes and smart positioning. Kelsey Mitchell got downhill and found easy buckets around the rim. But after halftime, it seemed like a completely different team came out. The Valkyries made the necessary adjustments defensively, attacking the paint, and daring the Fever to beat them from the outside. Instead of countering with poor spacing and off-ball movement, Indiana kept forcing the ball inside, right into the teeth of the defense. There were no effective counters, no spacing adjustments, no off-ball screens to free up shooters, no inside-out playmaking from Boston. It was rigid and predictable. Meanwhile, the Valkyries started to heat up. Shots that weren't falling in the first half began to drop. 3 after 3 started to rain down, and that confidence snowballed. Players who had missed open looks were now drilling contested jumpers, including back-to-back corner threes and deep perimeter bombs. Indiana's defensive rotations were late, and their closeouts were slow and ineffective. Their defensive rebounding was downright abysmal. Time and again, they allowed the Valkyries second-chance opportunities by failing to box out or secure long rebounds, leading directly to momentum-killing threes and easy putbacks. The most demoralizing play might have been when a Valkyries player missed a wide-open three, got her own rebound uncontested, and then finished through contact for an and one. That's not just poor execution, that's a lack of effort. Caitlin Clark had a tough night, going 0 for 7 from beyond the arc and struggling to find rhythm. She managed to contribute with assists and rebounds, but her scoring presence was non-existent, and the team couldn't carry the load without her offensive output. That's not to say Clark is immune to criticism. Superstars need to show up, and she didn't in this game. But the team's overall failure to adapt and support her on an off night is the real concern. She should not have to be superhuman for Indiana to win. That's what separates average teams from contenders. The ability to rise when your best player struggles. And yet, Kelsey Mitchell continues to be inconsistent. Yes, she ended the game with a decent field goal percentage, but most of those points came from simple finishes, not shot creation, not game-changing baskets when it mattered. Her off-the-catch shooting has regressed, and her role in the offense has felt uninspired and poorly integrated. Aaliyah Boston, who dominated early, got into foul trouble and faded as the game wore on. The system failed to pivot once the Valkyries began loading up the paint.